Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting of Wednesday, May the 18th, 2022. My name is Ursula Souza Fontaine, your clerk, and pursuant to Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting of the Somerville Zoning Board of Appeals will be conducted via remote participation. A recording of these proceedings can be accessed at any time using the registration link at the top of this agenda. We're kind of mixing up our agenda tonight. Tonight, we're going to hear first in line is going to be 35 McGrath Way. Our clerk tonight is Catherine Garavaglia. Would you be so kind, Catherine? This is a new case this evening.
Yes, Madam Chair. This is 35 McGrath Highway, P&Z 21-156. The applicant is seeking variances for the following requirements of the high-rise district for front setback requirements, driveway in the frontage area, facade is also not parallel to the front lot line.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Is
Madam
the
Chair.
applicant here? Yes.
Yes, the applicant is here. I'm going to promote Joseph Hanley and Tom Miller. Joe and Tom, which one of you should be able to share your screen?
Oh, good afternoon, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Fine. Okay. Attorney, I don't know if you can see me or if you need to, but
if you could, please.
okay. Attorney Joe Hanley, McDermott, Quilty and Miller, 28 State Street in Boston, representing the ownership of 35 McGrath Highway. Also with me is the client's representative, Ken McClure, and our architects from Stantec, Werner Hoffman and BK Boley. We have a presentation for you, Madam Chair, that I believe Stantec can share, or Tom Miller. Tom?
I am attempting to figure out how to do that now.
This is Charlotte speaking. Tom, I'm making you the presenter right now, so new options should pop up and you should be able to share your screen.
Thank you very much.
And while you're doing that, just to confirm that, Madam Clerk, if you can let in Werner Hoffman and BK Boley if they're with us as well.
Madam Chair, this is Charlotte speaking. I'm unmuting Werner Hoffman and BK Boley. They can unmute themselves at any time, but if they're not speaking, I just ask that they stay muted to avoid any potential sound feedback.
Thank
Great
you.
for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity for being here tonight. I just want to introduce you to our team, just go over quickly the agenda, and then take you through some background on the site and the zoning request, and then I'd like to ask the architects from Stantec to show you the site views and some of the collaboration that we've had, and most importantly, why the 4 variants that are requested are justified by virtue of the unique land conditions and the resulting hardship. Next slide, please. So obviously we introduced ourselves. I'm going to take you through the zoning summary, and then the last part of our presentation, I think, will illustrate in pretty good detail why the relief makes sense. So as was read into the record, the site is located at 35 McGrath Highway in Ward 2, sort of the gateway coming from Cambridge into Somerville on McGrath Highway. And what we are seeking to do in this quarter is to comply with the adopted zoning that is enforceable in place for high-rise zoning, and to build a building to create jobs in life sciences, research, and commercial office. replacing a sort of distressed and underutilized structure that doesn't take advantage of the allowable zoning, but also to address some discordant property shapes and impacts that were created by, let's say, the injustice of McGrath Highway and some of the work that was done in the history of that, and prepare for the future. Next slide. So you'll see on the right here, on the left, excuse me, in the right there where it's being circled in purple, that is in Ward 2, the section on the north side of McGrath Highway heading into Somerville from Cambridge, where the site is located. And on the right are just some images of some of the sort of inspirations and things that we think about as creating a new gateway, job creator, incubator, life sciences building, again, which would be allowed by special permit site plan review, subject to correcting some of the deficiencies at the site that we're here for tonight. So next slide, please. This just is intended to show you what is a compliant under the zoning massing and facade setbacks. What we're here to talk to you about is variances from 4 areas, that being the first, the front yard. The minimum front yard requirement is 2, and the maximum front yard setback is 15. And the third variance is the facade. The front facade needs to be parallel with the street line, and the fourth is the front driveway. So all of these 4 variances relate to the impacts at the front of this site as it relates to McGrath Highway and a certain MassDOT taking that allowed for what's called Squires Bridge, which is the bridge, the up ramp as you're going into Somerville from Cambridge. And that's, this property happens to be sort of underneath it at an angle. So next slide, please. So I think this helps to kind of show this a little bit. Obviously, an aerial view, you'll see in the red hash our property. This is known, Madam Chair, members of the board, as the telecom building. You'll see it next to it is life storage. So when you're coming into Somerville from Cambridge, and to the right is what was Save More Liquors for a long time. And to the right of that is the former car wash, planned to be a hotel. Our abutters to the right, which was Save More Liquors, were granted relief for some of the same variances for similar reasons, and have gone through site plan review for a commercial office and laboratory development as well. So we've been working very hard with the city, the planners, and mobility in particular about how this area of Somerville can be a new welcoming place in compliance with the ordinance for safe, passable streets and making way for a new ground level boulevard in curing sort of the past ills of McGrath Highway. Next slide, please. Just to bring you in closer. So you'll see again in the red hash with the red dot, that is our building. To the right with the white roof, that is life storage. And I'm sorry, that is the Save More site at 15, and then to the left is life storage. What's important to note here too is that the MBTA tracks are directly in back of us. So this property, our property, which you'll see in the red hash, is constrained by 4 things. One in the back is the MBTA railroad tracks, obviously, that are existing. To the right and to the left are the as-built and the conditions that are allowable in the HR. But to this point, and for the variances that we're seeking, is the front yard. So if you look at where the building is in the vast amount of spaces, it would appear as if the front of the property runs parallel to McGrath Highway, but it actually does not. It runs diagonal because of the MassDOT taking that created Squires Bridge, and further, that taking created a jug handle access for vehicles to go in to the west. that essentially landlock the parcel. And so if you go to the next slide, that'll show this in plan detail. So the thoroughfare being the existing McGrath Highway. To the north, our site, you'll see next to the yellow hashes there, sort of a dog leg, we call it a jug handle, if you will. So that is to the west of us, but trans kind of goes through the front of our site and is the only means for vehicular access, which also supports the front driveway request that is the fourth variance. So next slide, what I'd like to do is just kind of show you, close up what we're talking about. So you can see as you go up the bridge here to the upper left, the white mass is our existing building and sort of that discordant front yard. And then to the right, you can see another view of that, again, with the Save More Liquors space property next to us, and how that jug handle kind of works to landlock the front of our property. The one to the lower left, I think, really helps a lot because it also shows that not only is the front yard discordant asymmetrical, but it also has change in grade. And just to put this into context, and you saw this in the planning recommendation, apart from the hardship, the city is working with Boston, Cambridge, MassDOT, MBTA. We've been engaged with that, to try to create a new thoroughfare. And this is what we're talking about, to remove the bridge and to go to an at-grade thoroughfare and create a walkable and passable and safe environment, which we're very mindful as we look at our zoning compliant commercial development. Next slide, please. So I'm going to ask either Warner or BK. We asked them to do is put together some views and plans. You're going to see the plans which we have been working with the city and planning, and also working with our abutters on. We've also reached out to the Brick Bottom artists. Should we proceed, we would need to go through a pretty robust site plan special permit process, which of course includes full public review and much more engagement, and we're looking forward to that. But we wanted to show you both the plans that are being conceived, and also did some diagrams to show if we were to comply and site this building in this way, how that hardship would really result in something that is not desirable, and more importantly, the relief is justified. So Warner, you want to take it from there?
Let me see, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. So I'm very curious what the next slide is going to show us and what I can tell you about it.
Yeah, next slide, there you go.
Oh, this is
But for
just
the
a,
Excuse me. Hello. For the
Yeah.
record, could you say your full name, please, and your role in this is?
I'm Werner Hoffman, that's WERNER HOFMANN. I'm an architect with Stantec.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. So the only thing that's actually interesting to see here, I think, is that diagonal line in the front. That is the easement that, takes the line that will be parallel to the street back a notch. And you will see in hopefully in future slides what that means for us. Let's see the next one. So this is a plan to orient you. This is rotated 90 degrees. On the left side is McGrath Highway. You see then that little orange strip, that's the access easement with the diagonal line that obviously is not parallel to the street. And then the ground floor of our building. It is a very narrow site. On both sides, there is limited access. There is no access in the back. There is an agreement with the next door neighbor that allows us to put loading and utility access in the back of our site. But in order to make the site safe for visitors and employees, we are proposing to put the access to the parking garage. You see it on the upper left side, into the ramp, into a parking garage that's 3 levels underground. And then also having the front door facing the street, which is where front doors like to be, with a small drop-off area off of that access easement. And in order to accommodate all that, obviously with the street being several feet above our ground floor at the existing grade, we need a little more space to accommodate a drop-off area. So we're proposing to push that ground floor facade further back than the allowed 2 foot to 15 foot. It just need a little more space there.
Can you, as you're talking, please show us with your cursor where you're talking and draw? Yeah, I want to see that more readily, please.
Yeah.
Where's show me the front where you want to go. And there's your parking garage entrance there as well.
Thank you,
Okay,
Tom.
and then go forward to what you were saying now.
So, Tom, if you could, I can't move the cursor myself, so forgive me. Tom, you might show the drop-off area. That's that wide area in front of the lobby. Show the vestibule,
Thank you.
the lobby, and next to it also the bike parking that's accessible right from the front. Right.
Mhm. Thank you.
Now, as you can see, one of the things we try to do right from the get-go, even though we have this diagonal line, we try to pretend that the building is parallel to the street. So we have the garage entrance is parallel, and the lobby is somewhat parallel. Of course, it's very challenging because McGrath Highway is also not quite perpendicular to any of our building. So that was one of the guiding principles to begin with, but with the diagonal line on the front, it doesn't make it easy to work around the 2 foot and the 2 foot minimum, 5 foot max, 15 foot maximum setback that we should have from our front line. So if we go to the next image, this shows our preferred upper floor. What you can't see here anymore is and I just have to ask you to imagine the parallel street that's almost parallel to the edge of the slide on the very left side. So we're proposing to have 2 sets of almost parallel lines for our building, and that mostly comes from the fact that we would like to optimize the inside. Laboratory benches, office furniture tends to be rectilinear, not angular. And if we can, articulate the facade as we do, then we can actually furnish it with, off-the-shelf product. Do we have another slide? This is the garage underneath. You see we're just hugging pretty much the site in the front and the sides. And then these are a couple building sections. I don't think they are very relevant to the discussion of the variances. Here you can see one more time the building with the proposed building, and very clearly you see the original property line on the front next to the McGrath Highway in red, and then the blue, the current property line due to the land taking for the jug handle, and our attempt to have two sets of parallel lines that are again addressing McGrath Highway rather than this arbitrary property line. these are views that compare what we are proposing to do, which is these parallel faces to the line, and what it would do if we were to actually follow the rules with 2 foot to 15-foot setback off of that diagonal going through the site. And as you can imagine, we find, having the parallel walls further back from the street is a more appropriate reaction to what zoning would like to do than following this somewhat arbitrary diagonal line. This here is 2 more views a little closer to sort of that you can envision what that might look like. Unfortunately, on the left side, you have to again envision or imagine the McGrath Highway rising on the left side in front of the building, as well as to the right, in the right image. This here, 2 more slides, the rear towards on the left side next to the MBTA, mimicking the front facades on McGrath Highway.
And that is the end of the presentation.
Yeah, so just to summarize here too, we had submitted, for the board, a full statement of reasons and with references and exhibits. One of is the MassDOT taking in 1956. We provided you with the Registry of Deeds recording that is enforceable, is what was used to create Squires Bridge and created this really challenged circumstance, and also the sole means of access through the jug handle. And as you see, both the project being constrained on both sides and by the T in the back, there's no other place for us to put the driveway, but we have, worked in a way to mitigate impacts and to look at how we can bring truck and receiving traffic in a different way and then make way for the future along McGrath Highway. So thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Hanley, one quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
It says on the chart here, it says original property line in red.
Yep,
That was back in the 50s.
right.
Is that what you're referring to? With MassDOT back then?
Yeah, so that was the 1956 taking, which basically, put the bridge in the
Yeah.
on-ramp, if you will, that went diagonal over what was then, the property did front symmetrically on McGrath until that was changed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, to the board, normally, I'm just going to open this up to the public unless you have something pertinent you want to ask right now that you can't wait till later. You girls, you ladies all set waiting to see what the public has to say? Good, thank you. Charlotte, we'd like
Yes,
to open
madam.
this up to the public if we may.
Yes, Madam Chair. So for any members of the public who have not been to a ZBA hearing before, the way that you indicate that you wish to speak is you can either raise your hand. There's a little button on your control panel that looks like a hand, and you can press that. Or you can put a message in the chat just letting us know that you want to speak. We cannot accept public comments through the chat box. At this time, I see Polly Pook with their hand raised. Polly, you are unmuted.
Hi, thank you very much, Madam Chair. My name is Polly Pook, and I am from the Brick Bottom condominium complex. And
Thank you, welcome.
I wanted to comment that we have no objection to anything that the owners have asked for, except that the setbacks in the rear and the way that they've masked the building is going to cast shadow on our building and on our rear parking lot. And I think you know that we have been fighting this battle with 15 McGrath, with 35 McGrath, and with 51 McGrath. And with 51 McGrath, the zoning board and planning department saw how important this was, and in fact changed that designation from high rise to 4-story, or 6-story rather. And on 15 McGrath, we've been working with them to try to mitigate some of the problems of the shadows. With 35 McGrath, we've had one meeting, and I think it seems as though there's a lot that we could work with here. For example, they show their mechanical roof system on the northwest side instead of on the southeast side, which aggravates the condition for us and creates a bigger shadow. Whereas if they put their solar panels, which I assume was what those blue lines were, on the northeast and flip that around, that could help us. Similarly, if the setback was greater, so if the footprint looked a little bit more like the garage, that could help us. So in sum, what I really want to say is that in considering giving them a variance for the front setback, you may want to consider giving a stronger need for a rear setback or rear massing requirements to avoid the problem that they're going to be casting on the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. To Mr. Hanley, I guess, do you have any images to show us about what she's referring to?
Yeah,
that
I
you
mean,
can point out?
first, if I can just address, first of all, I want to thank Ms. Book for her participation. We look forward to continuing to work with her. A lot of the issues that were raised don't pertain necessarily to, the variances, but we have addressed, we already have moved the mechanicals on the rooftop closer to 15. If you read the recommendation from the planning board and in our work with planning, it was their finding that there wasn't an impact. But in any case, we would, we're talking about the rear of the site here. She is absolutely correct. We engaged in the rezoning process, and there was a reason why we were kept in the high-rise zone, and a building to the left of us was removed from it. And we intend to comply with all those requirements and work very closely with Brick Bottom, with Ms. Book and their organization and building. We've already taken those steps, and I think if you read the planning report, you'll see that there was a finding. We also took the initiative of doing a shadow study and sharing that, even though we're not in the site plan review process at this point. As for images, Tom, for the relief that is requested, aligning the front of the building would reduce any arguable impacts on, if you think about, Brick Bottom heading to the left of us, right? Rather than having that kind of discordant bump out there, to have more symmetry, along that. And I think you'll see, can you speak a little bit, Werner, to Warner, excuse me, to the mechanicals and the discussions that we've had on that?
Can everybody hear me? I think I'm unmuted.
Yes,
Yes.
no, you're not. We can hear you.
Okay. So you're absolutely correct, Joseph. The geometry of the front that we're in for right now to seek a variance does not impact whatever is going on in the back. We did move the mechanicals to the right side, towards 15 McGrath, and depending on the construction of that screen wall, we were talking to Brick Bottom about potentially introducing, once we go into design, a way of casting more sunlight through that screen. By just moving the heavy equipment to the other side, we actually have now the opportunity to do that. Right. That's
Yeah.
about the extent of our current development.
Yeah, thank you, Warner. And Madam Chair, again, Attorney Joe Hanley, just to clarify, so when I'm talking about the recommendation, the city, this during the overhaul, this section, including the building to the east of us, the property to the east of us, was all in the high-rise district. And then most recently, there was a discussion about changing that, which did pass. And there was a very detailed examination, and that is which we submitted shadow studies in the city, found that there was no impact, that therefore this property was kept into the high rise. So what we're showing you is a project that complies with all of the underlying zoning for the new zoning, with exception to the hardship that is created at the front, which, as you heard, doesn't have an impact. But I will say, we are very much looking forward to continue to work with our neighbors in Brick Bottom. We value them, and we actually see an opportunity to integrate artist programming into this building and work in a very respectful way through the robust site plan review process. Should we be granted this relief and proceed to that formal process, which has a lot of outreach as part of it, as you know. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public? Charlotte?
Madam Chair, Councillor Scott has raised his hand. Councillor Scott, you are unmuted.
Good evening.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's good to see you. And
Yeah.
thank you to the honorable members of ZBA. Just coming tonight to also thanks to Polly for coming in from Brick Bottom. I have been in communication with folks at Brick Bottom about this. I haven't heard any objections to the variances that are being requested right now. And honestly, it's probably better for Brick Bottom if they do get them. But that said, there are a lot of considerations that are going to need to be taken very seriously in the site plan review process, and make sure that whether it's increasing some of the rear setback or modifying that rooftop mechanicals, those are things that we're going to have to work through with the planning board on that. But in terms of the variances here to allow a building to proceed on the site, that just makes sense. I haven't heard any objections to it, and I just wanted to pass that along. And my thanks to the folks in Brick Bottom and to developers for staying in constant communication on it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I will give it a moment or two more, but at this time, I don't think there is anyone else indicating that they wish to speak on this case. No additional hands have been raised.
Okay, thank you. So we'll close. I don't know where this is going tonight. So as far as, I'm going to leave the public portion open for the rest of the evening in case we go back and forth here, and open it up now to the board for their consideration. Yes, Catherine Garavaglia, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had some questions. If we could please pull back up the Alta survey. Great. So my question is, I was looking through the exceptions from Schedule B from what looks to be a Commonwealth title commitment, and then the legal description. Who owns this triangular parcel?
Joseph Hanley?
Yeah,
Are you
that's,
referring-
go ahead, Tom.
Is that the
Yes.
Mass Dot?
Are you referring to this portion of the property? that
Yes.
I'm highlighting? That was the portion of the property that was taken during the MassDOT, the MDC originally, but MassDOT now,
Okay.
created that jug handle back in the 50s.
I'm sorry, I was trying to, yeah, if you can see that, I was having a hard time seeing this in the smaller, but yeah, where Tom's cursor is, that is what created a Discord front yard. And so the land area within that is the subject of the MassDOT taking, which is on record and still enforceable.
So does MassDOT still hold the underlying fee simple interest in this triangular parcel?
Yes,
Yes.
it's
Okay.
enforceable. It's on record, and our memo that we submitted has the book and page reference in the Middlesex deeds.
Okay. Is there a pertinent easement right to cross over that triangular parcel? Because I don't see that included in the legal description from Commonwealth.
Yeah, so the jug handle, which you will see, gives us, is the only means to egress if you go back, which is actually to the west. And Ken McClure, who is who is our client's representative, has spent probably more time than he would like on this with the title and attorneys and the insurance company. Can also speak to that. Ken, do you want to jump in here?
Madam Chair.
Yes, I have my hand raised. I don't know if anybody can hear me.
We can hear you now.
Okay. So yes, I have done extensive work on this. And to answer your question, so this taking was done by DCAM. So Department of, I don't remember exactly what it is, but so DCAM actually took the property. And then there is a memorandum of care and control in 2009 that was completed and transferred over to Mass DOT. So Mass DOT has care and control over the parcel, but we do not actually hold an easement right over the parcel. Now, Mass DOT agrees that we should, and we are working through the process right now with Mass DOT on how to address this issue. So it is, to say it's fairly complicated is definitely an understatement. Right now, and as part of this, if Tom, you can go to the slide that shows the overall Rufo Road intersection. And so, yes, right here. So you'll see there's a lot of lines on this plan that is a major overhaul to the Rufo Road intersection. And so this is so I've sat in numerous meetings here with 30 different people from multiple entities, from Mass DOT District 4, District 6, City of Cambridge, City of Somerville, all three development teams with their civil engineers to address this issue specifically. And as you'll see, our new entrance, as would come through part 6 of this, or part 5 of this intersection renovation, it actually has this crossing across here. So Mass DOT is extremely aware of this piece of property, and we are currently working on exactly what the legal mechanism is that is going to grant us the access across this property.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, it's a good discussion, but it only supports the basis for the grant of relief. The easement, actually, an easement or not, the current conditions dictate where the driveway needs to be, in addition to the impediments of the rail lines in the back and the conditions on both sides, right? And so, but the other thing is, that if you read the planning recommendation on that item to your board, it does speak about that collaboration that has been pretty extensive. As you know, we're at the intersection of 2 cities, with Cambridge and Somerville. MassDOT, throw in MBTA, a few other acronyms, and there's a lot of work that's going into this. There's also an applied condition here over the years, if you look at this, that has been utilized, and so it's reasonable to insert that, to assume that with both those implied conditions, as well as all of the work that's been done with MassDOT and what the city is planning for, that there will be an access way that will be created.
But you're asking us to approve a driveway in land that's not owned by the applicant and they don't have an easement right over at this time.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. I'm not asking you to
Clarify.
approve a driveway. I'm asking you to grant relief for the driveway on our property that we own to be situated in the front, which is a requirement of the zoning code that we deviate from, due to not the fact that we don't have an easement, but due to the discordant shape along the front and the fact that we're landlocked in the back and the side. So it actually has nothing to do with, the easement would relate to us going over the jug handle. The variances for what we're doing on our property.
So do your plans all show that driveway stopping right at the property line? Or do they all show it continuing on? Because I'm a little reticent to approve continued building off-site.
Ken, do you want to, I'm trying to.
Yeah, so what I would say here is that, you know, we're designing to what we own. You know, we understand that what's happening in front of us is somewhat of an unknown. But the reality is that, and we have a title insurance attorney that basically is ensuring that we will always maintain access through this. Well, they're working to ensure that we always maintain access. And Mass DOT has essentially told us that this will, at the very least, remain a public right of way. So there will never be anything that happens in this corridor while they have care and control of it, because they're not going to be able to sell it to anyone or develop on it, because they would also cut access to 51 McGrath. So nothing can happen there. So we can only build up to the property line. We're not asking for anything beyond that blue line shown on the property line.
Ken, if you go to page 11, you can zoom in on that part of the ground floor plan. This is BK Boley, principal at Stantec Architecture. If you go to the next drawing, you'll see that we are within our property line.
Okay.
For the stopping of the driveway. If you zoom in on that left-hand portion right there, that is where we stopped our design work.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're not asking to go over that. No, that's not what we're asking for.
So if the relief were to be granted, it would have no relationship whatsoever to the easement. Any future easement, any lack of an easement, or anything else. It would rather allow for all the work from the city and planning and the state to be continued in a collaborative way once we do connect.
Sure. I just have two follow-ups based on the prior comments. So there were two things that were of interest to me. One of them was a representation that this DOT parcel is actually a public right of way. Is that correct?
It is not a public right of way as of yet. So there are two courses of action.
Excuse me,
Yes.
is this Ken McClure?
Sorry, this is Ken McClure, the owner's representative.
All right, let me tell you, wait, excuse me.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Before we go any further, I don't want people talking over each other. And for the record, you must identify yourself each and every time you're going to speak. If Mr. Hanley's speaking and you chime in, you say who you are. Catherine was trying to say something and both of you gentlemen were talking over her. So this is very important. It's very intricate, and we're going to have nice, cool, and calm so everybody understands what's going on. Now, Catherine, you have the floor. Ask your question again, please. And if Mr. McClure can answer it or Mr. Hanley, either one's fine with me.
Yes,
Thank you.
I had asked if it was a public right of way, and I believe you're in the process of telling me it is not yet.
And apologies there, Catherine. I think that my internet connection may be a little slow. So apologies for speaking over you. So it is not a public right of way yet. And the reason that it's not is because Mass DOT with care of in control does not have the ability quite yet to grant us those access rights. So Mass DOT actually has to complete a land taking from DCAM, even though they have care and control. Now, I'm sure you can imagine how long that process is taking with all of the people involved, because we've been at it now since last June. I started this process, and I have been pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, but it's definitely a difficult issue that a lot of people haven't dealt with before. So we, while this is happening, are working to try to get our zoning and our site plan review as we work through the access. So we're only designing on our property, and we're just trying to, keep everything moving forward as the kind of intersection kind of works itself through the process.
Okay. No, I remember a lot of this conversation with 15 McGrath Highway and
Right.
the questioning about the easement rights in the area. And unfortunately, you have another title attorney here on the board. So lots of questions.
Yes.
So no, now I understand. I like that the plans are showing driveway stopping at the line. We have clarity, especially for the record, about what we might be approving. So I think I'm ready to yield. Thank you.
Thank you,
Catherine.
Catherine. Who's next? Ann or Ann? Ann Fullerton. Good evening, miss.
Good evening, Ms. Chair. Let's see, so if we could go to the second floor, please. Thank you. And are you able to zoom in at all on the McGrath Highway end of the building? If you're not, it's okay.
I don't think I can.
Okay, that's fine. My point is going to be, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page about the setbacks on the upper level. And I see that you're showing 2 feet, the intermediate setback, but you're showing it to the center line of structure, not to envelope. And the zoning code has setbacks to envelope. And then I clearly see that the setback at the top end of the site, or the western side of the site, is 13 and some change. And then the lower setback is it's hard to read, but I believe it's about a foot. So I wanted some clarity about what setbacks you're proposing. My understanding was that you were going to meet the setback requirements, but at this changed property line.
Yeah, may I, for the record again, Attorney Joe Hanley, McDermott Coulton Miller, thank you, Member Fulton, for that question. So the dimensional variances that are requested are all at the front lot line. So the zoning code, as you noted, requires 2 feet, 2 foot setback minimum, and then 15 feet maximum. And so this MassDOT taking and the asymmetry and sort of the conditions here result in the hardship that prevent us from complying with that. And that's what's being shown here. And then, so I'd like to ask now BK or Werner to introduce themselves and then speak to how this is laid out with each dimension.
Yeah, this is Werner Hoffman from Stantec. We are all on screen. I did this drawing. The front setback that you were looking at is actually 1 inch at the very lowest corner, then 2 inches on this in the center, and 13'8" on the top. So I'm not, one of the reliefs that we are looking for is to not comply with the 2 foot minimum, partially because it's somewhat random, because we have a random diagonal going across the side to begin with. And we didn't want to go beyond 15 feet on the other side, so.
And so when we, sorry, it's Attorney Joe Hanley again, Member Fullerton. So when we say that we are complying, all other aspects, dimensional controls, height, FAR, building footprint, open space, everything with the exception of what is necessary to cure the hardship in this unusual front yard condition is, the other items we are complying with. But of course, because of the scale of the project, it required a site plan review, which includes the robust public review process and a lot of scoping with the city. Thank you.
Thanks for your answer.
Thank you, Ann. Ann Brockelman?
Sure. Just to clarify that again, the setbacks that are in question are on different floor levels. I think that's why it was a little hard to find. I was a little confused. I was trying to find this. You're asking to go to 0, right? So you can touch this imaginary plane going up on the upper levels, where you can go as close as 0 beyond it. You have 1 inch. And then I was looking for the 32 feet, 4 inches ask. Then I realized that's on the first floor. Okay. Yes, I couldn't find that number at first. So that's there. Okay. So it's just overall the extent of the actual mass in relation to this imaginary plane, the front yard distance from this diagonal line. So I think that's fine with me. I guess the point I would make, just for public record, is we did go through this, with adjacent property, and the spirit of the zoning law is, zoning ordinance is the experience, right, of the pedestrian or even by car moving through the city, that we do want a consistent wall along the street edge. So the public would not perceive this imaginary lot line, they would perceive the sidewalk. So this indeed makes sense that you're trying to preserve, get us close to the front, what the public would be perceived to be the front part of the lot. They may not necessarily read this DOT easement driving through and walking past. So granting this variance does support that, which is actually the spirit of the zoning ordinance.
Thank you. Again, Attorney Joe Hanley, thank you for that comment. And that's actually consistent with, obviously we spent a lot of time reading through your decision for 15 McGrath next door, looking at this, and you'll see this in the planning recommendation, not just for the front yard dimensions that we were asked about, but also to pick up on the discussion we had for the driveway. Just reading from the planning board recommendation, by having the driveway to the leftmost side of the property further away from McGrath, applicant is attempted to minimize any effect the driveway may have on pedestrians and bicycle traveling along McGrath. So we're very mindful of, the ordinance and seeking the minimum relief necessary in a way to create a better pedestrian realm and public realm and pedestrian passage.
Now, can I say one more thing?
Yes, please.
Just for, again, to understand it procedurally, we are, if we were to approve these variance requests, it's not necessarily for this exact building design, right? We are approving a driveway.
Right.
This is for anybody who's listening, a driveway in the front lot, in the front line. You can get as close as 0 or 1 inch to this diagonal lot line anywhere, and then you can go back as far as the requested 32 feet. So the shape and the massing, technically, that's not what's before us. It's the ability to have that relationship with a lot line in front. So this is still subject to design review. The massing may change a little bit, but we're giving the applicant the freedom and the ability to work with this eccentric, condition of the site.
Thank you, Ann. I had some concerns that Catherine was bringing up. How can we approve something that DOT hasn't given up? Or what happens if we approve this and the applicant doesn't have any luck? I understand they're jumping through hoops. Can you explain that to me, Catherine? I don't know if you're the person to answer it, but give me an idea how to feel more comfortable. I'm saying they're going to the mat with Somerville, Cambridge, Mass DOT, different sections, 3, 4. I get all that because we've heard all this when we were talking about 15 McGrath as well. When I look at the models here and the images, like 15 just barely touches that elbow. And then you come closer to their rendition of what they'd prefer to do, what they want to propose. And, they're right up on top of everything. What happens if they don't get approval?
So, Madam Chair, I think that the applicant's team made it very clear that they're asking us to approve the driveway to the line of ownership that they have. And you're asking about a hypothetical of what if they're not able to get an easement over it. And in very professional lawyer speak, I like to call that not my problem. Yeah, that becomes their can of worms. There was a slight discussion about potential prescriptive and implied easement rights that they are welcome to battle out in court. That's not in our purview. Are we willing to let them build the driveway to the lot line, even though they have this strange frontage, and it would be closer to the frontage?
And how does that pan out in future days that they do go to court? Is somebody going to say, what was the Somerville Zoning Board of Appeals thinking when they approved this?
Well, I think
I don't want the applicant holding our head over their cop-out, them getting off and blaming us.
Yeah, I think we've made it very clear that we're discussing only up to the lot line and that we have no knowledge and make no representation that they'll have any easements.
Right.
I think we've kind of hammered that. And they do have an access point. It does connect to a public right of way. They can walk over it.
Okay. And how's the car get over it?
That is perhaps something that they can take up with their title insurance company, because it sounds like Commonwealth might be willing to do it.
May I?
Mr. Hanley?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr.
Yes,
Hanley?
ma'am. Yes, Madam Chair. Yes.
What do you think?
Yes, sorry. Attorney Joe Hanley again, for the record. Thank you. This is why we have site plan review, right? We are not asking the zoning board to approve this driveway that we're showing you. We were asking for relief for us to have a driveway location to be able to have the driveway in the front yard due to the constraints of the property. And, through site plan review, it would be certainly applicable if we did not have access, vehicular access to our site. I will say that you saw in the plans, we have an agreement with our abutter next door for trucks, deliveries and the like to go through their access. And so, my client wouldn't be expending large amount of money on this and effort and taking up your time in the cities if we didn't think that this was a viable alternative. So all we're asking for is the ability to work with the city through site plan review as to where and how that driveway may work on our property in the front, forbidden frontage of the site due to its constraints.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to ask the questions out loud so everybody think about it before we go forward. Ann Brockelman, yes?
I do have one thing that just occurred to me. Are there qualifications? What is a driveway, the width? I mean, could they turn the front of their building into a loading dock because we said you can have a driveway?
Madam
So, I
Chair,
mean-
this is
Staff.
Charlotte speaking.
Yes, Charlotte?
There are requirements about driveways in the ordinance. Driveways are not permitted to be wider than 24 feet. If the driveway is wider than 24 feet, they would need to return to the board for another hardship variance.
What is
In terms
shown
of-
there, just for a sense of scale?
I will let the applicants
This
answer
is
that
Werner
in more
Hoffman.
detail.
Yes,
This is Werner
Werner.
Hoffman from Stantec. It's 22 feet.
Thank you.
Right now it's 22.
Yes, into the garage.
Okay. And Ann asked if they decide to make the front a receiving dock. So trucks are, what do you need for a truck? What's, Charlotte? What are the dimensions if it's a truck?
Madam Chair, this is Charlotte speaking. I don't think, because there is the access easement on the right side on 15 McGrath's property to the loading dock in the rear, that would be where loading would happen. So that is item one. Item two, I don't want to speak for our mobility division, but I will speak for our mobility division in that I don't think they would approve or be supportive of having the entire
Yeah.
front of the property be
I don't either.
loading
Yep.
for a lab building.
Okay.
If I may, Madam Chair,
Yes,
too,
Mr.
just to,
Hanley. Yeah.
yeah, again, Attorney Joe Hanley. So Charlotte's exactly correct. And if you'll see on the plan, we do have easement rights. We won't be using that driveway front location for trucks. It would only be for passenger vehicles to access the garage. And so independent of any concerns about the mass dock taking, we actually have access already that we've proposed, and the abutters have worked with us next door to grant us rights for. Now, all of this is still subject to planning board
Yeah.
site plan review,
Sure.
which can really put teeth in us on the driveway and everything else. And we look forward to working with them.
Okay. All right, so let me say this to the board. There's no, Charlotte, do one more shout out, please, for the public in case anybody has come in. If anybody has spoken already, that's done. We're looking for new voices. Anybody
Yes,
out
madam.
there?
For any members of the public who may have joined, you can let me know that you want to speak by either sending a message through the chat box or raising your hand. I will give it a moment or two more. Madam Chair, there is no one indicating that they wish to
Okay.
speak.
All right, then I will close the public portion of the meeting for 35 McGrath Highway. That's P and Z 21-156. Now I'm going to go to the board, and I'm going to ask you some questions for Ann Fullerton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to remind you that we had a written public comment that we should note as part of record.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you did, because it was quite lengthy. It was from the gentleman from the Brick Bottom, and I think I ran my copies off on it. I have it right here. Do you have it in front of you, Ann Fullerton?
I do, Madam Chair.
You do?
I do.
For the record, would you please say who it was from? And we did get it in our emails, and thank you very much. So I don't have it in front of me, and I ran off all the copies.
Yes, so it was dated May 17th, 2022. It's from Mr. Bill Valletta, Valletta, who is a Brick Bottom resident, and we did receive it via email.
Thank you. And just for the record, we've heard from Mr. Valletta in the past, like with Polly. They're a very active group. We respect that very much, and I thank you, always thank you for your input. Anybody have anything else they'd like to add? No? Okay, so my next question to the board here is that, we have a certain criteria that we like to follow. So I want to pull up my little papers for you so we do the right thing. Are you folks ready to vote tonight? Yes? Or do you have some unanswered questions? No? Okay, good. All right. What I'd like to do, okay. On the hardship variances, here we go. So I want to know if do you believe that the criteria for number one has been satisfied? Now we have, let's see what we have here. I want to just double check things here. To seek the variance for the following. So we have the high rise. Okay, so we have a front yard, the driveway, and then the facade not being parallel with the lot line. So we have 3 variances to address. Am I right on all that? Charlotte?
Madam Chair, there are technically 4 variances, but as they're, because it is a request from both the minimum front setback and the maximum front setback, but I think as long as the board is clear, it may be reasonable to group some of the variances together when you're discussing them. That is appropriate as long as you like identify which variances you're grouping
Good.
together
Yes,
and which
that
ones
was
are.
the next question I had for you too, is how would procedurally you like us to go forward? Did you want them all addressed individually?
I think, this is Charlotte speaking. I think as long as you clearly, like if there are variances that you have different reasons for feeling one way or another about, you should address those separately. But if there are variances that you think like the same reasons lead to you believing something about criteria 1 and the same reasons lead you to believing something about criteria 2, I think you can address those as a group.
Okay, and as we go forward, if you don't like the way something's being handled, we don't want to create any, mistakes or misunderstand. You correct us, we don't mind. I would at this moment, if you don't mind, I'd like to take a recess for like 5 minutes, if that's okay. Does anybody have a problem with that? No? Okay, so we're gonna just recess for just 5 minutes and we'll be right back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sharing. People can hear you. Good. Mhm. 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 Oh, yeah? Everybody back? Here I am. Good, thank you. I apologize for that. Charlotte,
Yes, Madam Chair.
we're back. Thank you, Mr. Hanley. Thank your staff for doing that for us. We appreciate it. So I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Can everybody hear me? Good, okay. Call it back to order, and just for the record, attached to your packages, you have the hardship review, all your paperwork in front of you so we can go forward. So, to the clerk, want to just start right at the top from the legal notice, which would be the front setback requirements. We'll address that first.
Sure, Madam Chair. I think at least my reasoning behind my decisions is going to be pretty much the same as to each one of the concerns.
Okay,
So
yeah,
I think my comments we're going to say that they apply to the front and side setbacks, the driveway and the frontage area, and the facade. So for criteria 1, we're looking for special circumstances related to something about the property. In this particular one, shape, that really jumps out as to all of these. We've got
Right.
a really strange triangular piece that was taken away from the front of it. If a literal enforcement of the zoning code would result in a triangular building with a very narrow pathway to get to the public right of way. We've made it very clear that the driveway is just, that we're talking about is just to the edge of the property line. I think the public would probably be disappointed to see a building that was built following the frontage as opposed to something following the street. It would look out of place. So I think not only would it be desirable to grant all of the hardship variances, I think there would be harm in not granting them.
I agree. You know, like you're saying, you have to think about if we say no to this, what do you say yes to? And is that going to be in kind with the neighborhood and what the future is going to be there? We've got a nice chance with fixing up all these spots, and we might as well do it right. Ann Fullerton, you have something to add?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The one thing I want us all to think about is Stantec has done a really great job presenting a really palatable idea for the building massing. But as we've discussed, the final building massing is unknown. We are granting these variances in concept. And so I think that one of the things I want the rest of the board to be clear about is the current massing we were shown tonight had a 15-foot setback on the first floor and a 0 lot line setback on every floor above, so 2 through 9. That if we grant that a 0 line setback, it basically says they can build 0 lot line all the way down to the ground level, which I'm not sure I'm comfortable with. In concept, they have shown that that's not their intention, but we don't know what the final massing is going to end up being.
So how do we deal with that?
Well, I mean, we could request that the first floor meets some range of setback. So we could say 7 feet minimum, 15 feet maximum. It's really up to us. We could say 2 feet, keep it to the existing zoning, 2 feet to 15 feet. And then 0 lot line for everything above, if we're comfortable with that as a massing concept.
Catherine?
I like the points that Ann Fullerton has brought up. I do have some concerns about, like, we're coming up with language on the fly, right? So that's always challenging. So Councillor Scott talked about there being site plan review and neighborhood conversations. I'd be reticent for us to put a specific number limit on this, just because what if they need that extra foot because the neighbors need it and then we make them come back? So I get a little worried about that. Maybe there's some way to say in character with the drawings we've been shown, or something a little bit more fluid to make sure the neighbors can get what they need. And I'm
Yes.
confident in Councillor Scott's advocacy on that front.
Right, and I like Ann shaking her head, so she understands where you're coming from. So it seems like you two have a meeting of the minds. Charlotte has her hand up.
Madam Chair, I agree with the hesitation to not write condition language on the fly, because that can always get into tricky territory.
Sure.
There could be a few approaches of how, if the board wants to grant relief but limit the amount of relief granted, there are a couple approaches. One approach could be if, for example, on the ground floor, say the maximum front setback can be, as shown, the 32 feet and some inches, but the minimum setback must be at least X number of feet. And that would prevent, and then doing the same thing for the upper floors of the minimum setback being 0 feet and the maximum setback. If you wanted to impose maximum, you could, or you could not, that would be up to you. And clearly identifying that there are different variances being granted for different floors, or one for the ground floor and one for the upper stories. We could figure out the exact language later, but if the board wanted to discuss limits like that, that could be an approach.
Ladies?
Madam Chair, it's Ann Fullerton speaking. That seems like a reasonable approach to me. I guess I would ask Mr. Hanley if he and his team would be confident with us setting those limits around what they've shown us.
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you, Member Fullerton, Attorney Joe Hanley, McDermott, Quilty Miller. BK or Warner, just my only sensitivity is what Charlotte had indicated is, you know, site plan review is really, a lot about
Right.
this and has the public input. So could you guys at Stantec, one of you gentlemen, maybe kind of speak to what we're showing and how we can
Sure.
retain that flexibility?
This is BK Boley, Senior Principal, Stantec Architecture. I think it's a good discussion. I'm a little concerned about tying some of the moves to specific numbers. Just because site plan approval requires us to do 3 different mapping alternatives for the project, just to get into a kind of design with the urban design group. But I totally understand, the reluctance to grant something where we could do a 0 lot line on the ground floor. So if we had to, then I think the ranges that Charlotte proposed, we could work within. I like the idea better of pushing it to the site plan approval commission in the next stage, so that we have the flexibility that they might want us to have moving forward.
The other, thank you, BK, and again, Madam Chair, Attorney Joe Hanley. The only thing I would add to that too is, there's a limit as to what we can do. We're not here looking for other variances, right? So in the new zoning that has been reinforced recently for us in the high rise, there are certain open space requirements that we're complying with, all the other setbacks, the height, the footprint size, and the like. So we want to retain, we're not looking for other variances, but we certainly want to be able to retain some flexibility, not just for our own interests, but in order to be able to work with the community and shape the building, as BK said, with multiple iterations of massing with Charlotte and planning. But again, I don't want to speak for Charlotte, but that would be our concern. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, Charlotte.
I do just want to clarify that, or state expressly for anyone who may not be aware of the differences between hardship variances and site plan approval. The board, when and if they grant hardship variances, needs to specifically grant those variances, and then the site plan approval process operates under that site-specific modified zoning. So I think the board sounds amenable to doing ranges. So if I could propose some ranges based on the existing plans, the board could require that the facade of the ground floor be somewhere between 2 feet and 34 feet 4 inches, which is the 2 feet comes from the permitted minimum setback currently in the code, and the 34 feet 4 inches comes from the plans as shown on the first floor. And then for the upper stories, limit the setback requirement to being somewhere between 0 feet and 15 feet, with 0 feet being what is shown on the plans and 15 feet being the maximum permitted setback for if no relief were being granted.
Yeah, those are good guidelines, I think. Yeah. You ladies agree with that? I do. It's a sense of reason. It makes sense. All right. Mr. Hanley, you understand all that? Is that okay with you? Or is PK still on board here? Can you hear us?
Thank you,
PK?
Madam.
This is
Thank you, Madam Chair.
BK Boley, Stantec Architecture. Perfect.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Madam
So,
Chair. As long as the architect
okay.
who's going to design it is good, we're good.
That's it, see? And then we have a couple architects sitting right here as well, so as long as we're kind of all going forward in a positive fashion. Okay, so so criteria 1 and 2, we're okay with on this one here, Miss Catherine?
Yes.
And what about number 3? Criteria number 3.
I think
think
we
we're all-
have addressed that.
I think we've all met that. So do you want to make a motion then for, let me look at my little cheat sheet here. The front setback requirements, minimum and maximum. We can put together, Charlotte? Is that what you said?
If the board, I think as long as the board specifically identifies all 4 of the variances in the motion, I think it is fine to make one motion.
Okay. And Catherine, on the language for making these presentations, do you need some help with that? Do you want Charlotte to help you with that? Or are you ready to go forward?
I'm happy to throw something out there and have Charlotte clean it up after me.
Okay, sounds good.
Great.
All right, so let's, all right, so we're ready to vote. We're considering our findings. Everybody seems to be on the same page here. So we'll go forward and have Catherine make a motion.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the request for hardship variances for the front and side setback requirements, the driveway frontage area, and the facade, subject to the proposed conditions contained in the staff memo, which I believe were recording the decision and the usual copy requirements, but also including the maximum and minimum setbacks for the front or the first and higher floors, as we discussed previously, that Charlotte will make nicer for us.
You have all those numbers, Charlotte?
I do, Madam Chair. I would just like to clarify that the setback, this hardship variances being requested in relation to setback requirements are for the minimum maximum front setback. There are no hardship variances being requested for the side setback.
Thank you,
Okay.
Charlotte.
Thank you for that correction. And you included in that the driveway frontage as well? Yes?
I believe so, yes.
And the facade not parallel to the front lot line?
I thought so.
Everything's all in there. And
Yes.
that's okay with you, Charlotte? Beautiful, thank you. So may I please have a second on the motion?
Second.
Ann Brockelman has seconded the motion, and we'll go around for the vote. Catherine Garavaglia,
Aye.
Ann Brockelman,
Aye.
Ann Fullerton,
Aye.
and Susan Fontano, aye. Let the record show the variances all passed unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hanley and your crew for your patience, and good luck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the board. Have a good evening.
Bye, Mr.
Thank you.
Miller.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Good luck. Okay. Thank you very much. That went much nice. Nice. We did nice. So the second one, we have to check with Miss Charlotte, is that our first client tonight coming up, our first applicant, they weren't here earlier. So here we go with 595 Broadway. Miss Charlotte, are they here?
They are here, and I will unmute them and get them ready while you open the case.
Thank you so much. Catherine Garavaglia, brand new case. Could you open it, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. I'd like to open 595 Broadway, P&Z 22-018. The applicant is seeking to extend the validity of 2 special permits granted under ZBA 2018-94 for an additional year.
Thank you. So is Broadway 595 going to come on screen with us?
Madam Chair, I have promoted both of the members of the applicant team who are present to being panelists so they can share their screen, or sorry, they can share their video camera. If they need to share their
Okay.
screen, just let me know and I can give you that ability as well, but you don't currently have it.
Hello, welcome.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Michael Barone Jr. I am an attorney with Roberto Israel and Weiner. Our offices are located at 255 State Street in Boston. I'm here on behalf of the applicant Fidelis Bridge Loan Venture 5, REO LLC, as you mentioned, relating to 595 Broadway in Somerville. As Ms. Garavaglio mentioned earlier, we are seeking an extension of validity of special permits that were issued back in October of 2018. Our client is the successor in interest to the original applicant from that October 2018 special permit application. And for clarity, I'm sorry, the special permit was for a special permit with site plan review for construction of a new building with 7 dwelling units and a special permit for parking relief. Our client became the successor in interest as a result of a mortgage foreclosure. Fidelis Bridge Loan Venture 5 REO LLC was the lender on that. The prior applicant unfortunately defaulted on the loan during COVID. Our client foreclosed. I believe we included a copy of the foreclosure deed or referenced it in our materials. And so our client is now looking to revitalize this application. Construction was not conducted within the time frame because of COVID. So our client is now working to extend those permits. By way of background, the property is a split lot. It's approximately 7,000 square feet with just over, or rather just under 2,800 square feet in Somerville. It fronts on Broadway. The remaining 4,200 square feet is located in Medford, which is a landlocked parcel. So we're actually in the process right now of pursuing all the appropriate approvals from Medford, which includes both zoning relief and site plan approval. Just for reference, the application, again, is for a 7-unit multifamily development. It will have 6 2-bedroom units, 1 1-bedroom unit, and all parking will be located below grade. We've provided 10 parking spaces and bike storage. All of the plans that were submitted in October 2018 are still the plans we intend on using for purposes of development and construction. And the plan here is to develop this in order to contribute to the housing stock and the availability of housing in the Somerville area. And I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. For the record, Charlotte, how's the audience? Anybody have any comments or questions for the board or for the applicant?
Madam Chair, there are 2 members of the audience present. One is Councillor Scott and one is Debbie Kanoa, who has raised their hand. Debbie, you are unmuted.
Good evening.
Hello. Hi there. Hello, members. Thank you for having me. I'm just voicing my my concern. I'm at 600 Broadway. This property has been vacant for a number of years and has been unkept all those years. So over the winter, there's no snow removal. The front yard is overgrown. There's trash. So my concern is that it is under ownership, but there's not any indication that there is maintenance of that property. So how does that go on record in terms of like showing my concern?
Okay, I will ask Mr. Baroni. When did your folks foreclose on this and take over?
I have that readily available. 1 second, please. They took possession in October of 2021.
Okay.
So that was, I guess, just this past fall.
Okay, so what we're here, you know, the Zoning Board of Appeals, one of our hats is that we have folks come out to our meetings. We want to hear what they have to say, and we hope we have some influence as we go forward, because it is really crummy to live in a city and have a real eyesore next door to you or down the street. You know, it's just, and I understand these last couple of years have been very different, and but as we go forward, you know, in good faith, we'd love to see that you knew the people, you folks here, Fidelis Bridge Loan Venture Company, really take on being a good neighbor as you go forward with the building process, the building hours. I mean, all that stuff's going to be laid out for you. Again, you've got all your rules and regulations, and I know Mr. Scott's on board with us tonight, so you know he'll be coming by and paying you a visit as well, because his constituents are very important to him. So this Debbie, is it Canilla? Canilla, am I saying it right?
Kanoa. Can you still hear me?
Yes, yes, we
Yes,
can.
Kanoa. Yes,
So,
Kanoa.
yeah, so as we go forward, we just came over the winter, so like she's saying, no snow removal, it's litter, summer's coming, it's hot. I don't know how soon you folks plan on, how fast do you think you're gonna hit the road running and getting this going?
Madam Chair, as soon as we have the extension of the special permits for Somerville and we have our approvals from Medford, our intention is to move full steam ahead with this. We understand that we're working with a tight time frame, having only the 1-year extension on our special permits. So we would like to get shovels in the ground as quickly as we can once we have all.
Okay, and what is the new date?
Excuse me?
What is your new date that you're extending? You're looking for an extension from us for 1 year. We're talking October.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, this is Andrew
Yes.
Graminsky with
Andrew,
Planning.
we're waiting for you to weigh in. Could you
I
speak
can
to us?
answer the
Andrew?
question, if you
Yes,
may.
please do.
Yes,
I'm waiting.
thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We're waiting for you to continue speaking.
Can you hear me? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Andrew Graminsky, for the record, planner with Planning, Preservation, and Zoning. The date of the expiration is when the former permit expired, which was February 10th, 2022. There are several factors that are kind of special with this permit because there was during COVID, there was basically a tolling period for zoning related permits. So the time frame is slightly different than usual permit validity period. So it will run from the date of the expiration, which is February 10th, 2022. So it's a year from that date. So the new permit would expire February 10th, 2023. I hope that answers the question for you.
February 10th, 2023. Okay, so we're not going beyond our 1 year limit because you've added on some other, right? Oh, good. I just want to make sure you're keeping us honest here. So the new date will be
Absolutely.
February 10th, 2023.
You got
Awesome.
it. Yep.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
Of course.
And does anybody have any questions for Andrew? This was his case. No? Okay, good. I didn't think so either. So as far as the Debbie goes, are you happy with what I said, Debbie, to Mr. Baroni?
Yeah, it's more of the maintenance. I guess when someone buys a property, there is an understanding that the property owners just maintain the exterior, right?
Sure.
The sidewalks. So I just haven't seen any evidence of anyone maintaining the vacant property, and there's a rat problem in the area, so
Yeah.
it's just a concern. Just saying that. Okay.
No,
Thank
you
you.
should. Baroni,
Yeah.
would you like to say something to the constituent who lives on the street?
We completely understand. We completely understand your concern, and we will certainly discuss that with our client and make them aware that there are concerns about the litter, snow removal moving forward, as well as clearing up some of the brush and just maintaining the property in a condition that would be neighborly.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Debbie. Mr. Scott.
Thank you.
Good evening. Welcome again.
Madam Chair, this is Charlotte speaking. Councillor Scott can speak if he wishes to, but I don't think this is in his ward. While he is welcome to comment, I'm not sure that he will have any.
Did you not say he had his hand up?
I did not. I said he was still present, but
Oh.
maybe Kanoa was the only one with their hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. So is that it then for the public portion?
Yes, Madam Chair, unless Councillor Scott does wish to say anything. There are only 2 members present, and the one who indicated that they wish to speak has spoken.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so not hearing anything, we'll close the public portion of this meeting. That's 595 Broadway, P and Z 22-018. And go forward with our zoning board here and see what we have to say this evening. Who would like to make a comment? You all have, yes, Catherine?
I'd like to follow up with a few questions just based on what we heard from the public. Is there a general contractor lined up for when you get, let's assume you get all your permits, like, are you ready to go?
Unfortunately, I do not know at this moment. We unfortunately were caught a little surprised by this meeting. We had not received any notice of the hearing, so I unfortunately do not have my team present. We do not have the architect or the actual applicant on the call with us. I can certainly check in on that and get back to you at a later date if that's what you would prefer.
Okay, 1 minute, Catherine. Is Andrew still with us? Charlotte?
Yes, Madam Chair, I am present.
Okay, can you not hear me?
There is a slight lag on my end.
Okay, so what ward does this fall in?
Could you please repeat the question?
What ward does this fall in?
You give me a second, I can determine that for you.
Madam Chair, I believe this would be Ward 5. Most of this portion of Broadway is in Ward 5.
Okay, and we have a new.
Yes, and I can confirm from
okay.
checking my records that it is Ward 5.
Okay, and we have a new counselor in Ward 5. That used to be Mr. Niedergangs, Sheriff. Okay, so what I want to tell Mr. Baroni is I would advise you folks, or whoever the channels go through, we have a new counselor in Ward 5. It would be really to your advantage to have somebody immediately get a hold of them and find out how you can work with them in the future so that everything runs nice and smooth and they can support you or let you know what they need to know. I mean, it looks pretty much like you're going to go forward, but you know, when the constituents and folks come out that they have an issue, I know the councilors really like to know that stuff. And, you know, and who knows, we do business with you more in the future too. It's good to know how everything, you know, goes to keep everything going smooth. So if you'd work with Andrew, he's in our planning office, and find out from him how you can get in touch with the Ward 5 counselor. And, you know, like you said, you weren't really well aware of tonight, so you really weren't prepared for your team and stuff. So maybe he's gonna have a little talk on the phone or whatever and move forward. I don't think we have a problem approving this tonight. These have been, like we said, rough couple of years. And it's too bad they foreclosed, you know, they couldn't make it and they lost the deal. So we wanna, you know, support the project and move forward and get the neighborhood back on track. Anybody else here on our board have any questions? Ann or Ann? I don't. I've said what I want to say. Yes, Catherine.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I have a few.
Go ahead.
So the current owner is an REO LLC. Are they intending to actually develop the property themselves, or are they conveying this out again?
My understanding is that they are intending to be the developers
Okay.
as opposed to conveying it out.
Because I was surprised to, I mean, I understand you're saying you didn't know, I'm not sure how, but that we were having a meeting tonight on this for an extension of the permit. So we're not sure if there's a GC lined up. It sounds like no one's been taking care of the property. So I'm just questioning if their plan was to unload it. You're saying?
I understand.
Okay. I'm okay to vote based on their attorney's representations here.
Okay. Andrew, this is Susan again. Do we know why they didn't know about the meeting tonight, that they would have their team here?
This is Andrew speaking. It was an error on staff's behalf. We use a online sort of system called via Smartsheets called PTS, and one of the I guess an automatic feature was not on or was not known to be working, which we thought would give the applicant notice of the hearing date tonight, and that wasn't the case. But I got in touch with them via email before the meeting just to let them know. And Michael was able to make himself present tonight. So that is the reasoning.
Okay, beautiful. So you'll talk with Michael and just button up some of these questions we had tonight?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to ask Catherine for a motion, please, in the matter of 595 Broadway.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to extend the validity of the 2 special permits that were issued under ZBA 2018-94 to February 10th, 2023.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Ken Brockelman, second. All those in favor, Catherine Garavaglia,
Aye.
Ann Brockelman,
Aye.
Ann Fullerton,
Aye.
and Susan Fontano, aye. Let the record show that in the matter of 595 Broadway, P and Z 22-018, all voted in the affirmative. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Baroni, and good luck with the project.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board.
Good night.
Good night.
We do have some other business here tonight. Let's see, where is Miss Charlotte?
I am here.
Hello.
So we don't need to read the item of other business into the record, but the item of other business on the agenda is amendment of application submittal requirements. I have a relatively brief presentation on that. We included those submittal requirements, which are 63 pages, give or take, in your packet last week, but did not expect you to read them in full by tonight. Tonight, I just wanted to give kind of an overview of why is this something that our team thinks is valuable and what improvements do we think will come out of this. I have a slideshow. Give me a moment.
Oh, this is like going to the movies.
Yeah. Okay. You all can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So we're presenting to you and to the planning board tomorrow night because we have joint submittal requirements for both boards. So I just want to kind of give an overview. If there are any questions, feel free to type them in the chat or just like write them down and hold them until the end. So, there we go. Okay. So the authority for establishing submittal requirements comes from 2 places. First, it comes from Article 15.1 of the Somerville Zoning Ordinance, which just says that the review boards shall establish submittal requirements and those need to be available on the city website. The other place is the special permit granting authority rules and regulations, which are found on Unicode. Chapter 1, Section 5 says the planning director shall prepare an application form for planning board and zoning board of appeals approvals to be used in filing any appeal or petition to the special permit granting authorities. The rules and regulations set out some minimums that this form has to include, but leaves the form and organization, etc., to the discretion of the planning director. So first, I don't know if you're familiar with the current submittal requirements. I don't expect you to be, but I kind of want to give an overview of how applicants use the current submittal requirements. So it's a 15 or 16 page document, and the way that you would use the current submittal requirements. First, you'd need to read the first 8 pages to review the general requirements for all development activities, including things like a narrative and a plot plan, and some specific requirements for some development activities. For example, there are some types of development activities that are referred to as limited scope. That's things like signage or establishing a use within a building, and those have a table on page 4 and 5 that addresses them specifically. After you've done that, you would then read pages 9 to 14, defined additional submittal requirements for certain development activities based on what is being proposed. So for example, if you're proposing what's defined as a high-rise building, in other words, a building that is 70 feet or taller, you would have additional submittal requirements. You would also have additional submittal requirements if certain pre-submission procedural steps are required. This basically means design review or a neighborhood meeting. So that applies to a lot of projects, but it's a 14-page document. It's not organized in the most clear manner. And we've found that a lot of applicants struggle with it. So the impetus for this project was basically that. It's been 2 years since these submittal requirements were put into place. They were put into place just after the new zoning code was adopted in December 2019, because we needed updated submittal requirements to account for the updated zoning ordinance. And they've been slightly updated since then, but we haven't really gone into the full submittal requirements as a document and thought about what's working and what's not, and done a rewrite of the whole thing. During the 2 years, when we've kind of had our submittal requirements that are working but not working great, we've gotten a lot of feedback from applicants on what exactly isn't working. This feedback has been informal in the sense that it's really just applicants expressing confusion or running into challenges and staff seeing some common threads through that. Two things that we saw being particular challenges are that this is a 15-page document, and for pretty much any project you're doing, you need to read all of it. And it's not necessarily laid out in a way that clearly conveys that or helps you understand what is relevant to you and what isn't. The other challenge is we have three pre-submission steps. We have a pre-submittal meeting, a neighborhood meeting, and a design review meeting that, while they're not applicable to all applications, are applicable to a lot of applications, but we don't have any written down advice on how to deal with those. All of the advice is kind of ad hoc. It's given by the planner to an applicant on a particular application, but there hasn't been anything written down beyond what's in the code on best practices. So with those two things in mind, we came up with a couple of goals of what we wanted to achieve with the rewritten submittal requirements. First, we wanted to establish a framework that can change over time. The submittal requirements that we sent you are extensive, but don't address every single special permit in the code, for example. One example is if you are proposing a dog park that is smaller than 10,000 square feet, that's not addressed anywhere in these submittal requirements. That special permit also hasn't come up yet, but these submittal requirements are set up so that if that comes up, we can accommodate these to account for that in the future. Second, we wanted to preemptively address some common questions that we hear from staff. This is related to the earlier thing of applicants will just be confused about things and we see common threads. And so we want to address those things preemptively and avoid applicants having questions if we can, rather than them asking it and us repeating the same information, because that doesn't save anyone time. The third thing was we wanted to create easy to use application checklists for common development activities. One example of a really common development activity where applicants often struggle to identify exactly what they need to provide is signage. Under the current submittal requirements, you need to look on a couple of different pages and read the whole thing to navigate it to identify what you need to submit for signage. With the new submittal requirements, we wanted application checklists where it would be a centralized place where you can identify all of the documents that are relevant and just kind of run through that. We also wanted to develop clear written standards for each document type. For example, if you're required to submit a site plan, but you don't know what needs to be provided on a site plan, the clear written standards will tell you the information that we're expecting on it, because it's not always the same in every community. For example, sidewalk depth, like how far your building is from the curb, is a regulated dimension in Somerville, but that's not regulated everywhere. And so identifying this is something we expect to see because we need to know it in order to confirm compliance, identifying that early in the process can help applicants avoid delays and revisions later on. We also wanted to provide consistent, timely guidance for applicants at each step of the process. So For example, when you're preparing for a neighborhood meeting, if we have a 2-page document that tells you some highlights and some best practices about how to do a neighborhood meeting, that saves everyone time and helps ensure consistency across the dozens of neighborhood meetings that are going on in the city at any given time. Last, we wanted to centralize information about when to contact other OSPCD divisions. So in a lot of development proposals, there will be different documents that other divisions kind of have control over. So one example that doesn't come up for the ZBA very often, but does come up with especially our bigger projects, is mobility management plan. So mobility management plan is something that you submit directly to the mobility division, and they have to review and approve it before you can have a complete application. The code sets out that the mobility division has 60 days to review and approve a mobility management plan. If an applicant doesn't realize that there's that lead time and they only start working on the mobility management plan just as they're finishing up their second neighborhood meeting, they're going to run into some delays that they didn't anticipate. So this guide tries to set out kind of hints or reminders of, if you haven't started working on this by this point in the process, you should consider that, because it's going to take some time and you can work on it while you're working on other steps. So for example, the mobility management plan, you can work on that while you're going through design review and the second neighborhood meeting, rather than needing to wait until those are complete. So those were our goals. Those goals, thinking about them, resulted in the design of the manual that you see before you. On the right, we have the table of contents, which is also shown on page 1 of the submittal requirements themselves. These kind of give a guide to what is in this manual. So we've conceptualized it as kind of being like a 2-step process in using this manual. Step 1, you identify what you're trying to do. So if you're developing a property, you might know, oh, I'm planning on building a building, but you don't know whether that requires site plan approval or a special permit or any other permits. You just know, oh, I'm developing a building. So we've tried to organize it with that in mind. You can see the activity types on the right. We have a variety. Some of them are more common than others, and this list can expand over time. If you're developing a principal building, you would go to chapter 2A, and it'll have a lot of information that is essential for you to know as you're developing a principal building. If you're developing a principal building and it's on a steep slope, you would go to chapter 2A and chapter 2I, and those will have the information that's applicable to each of those permit types. The exceptions to these are hardship variances, plan revisions, and administrative appeals. Those all kind of have special requirements, so we've put them in a separate chapter towards the end. They tend to be less common. They don't fit nicely anywhere. So once you've identified what you're trying to do, step 2 is choose or choose not to review the best practices and other standards that we have. Chapters 3 through 8 address those in various ways. So chapter 3 is every single term or every single document that we require is defined. We have various standards and summaries of what it is in chapter 3. So if you've gone through this process before and you know exactly what needs to be on a site plan, you don't need to go to chapter 3, you could skip it. But if you're new to the process, that chapter is really useful for helping make sure we're all on the same page when we're talking about these different terms. Chapter 4 has document standards, including that things need to be in PDF format, what size they need to be, some other things. It also has best practices for how to organize documents. We find that often applicants will struggle to organize, especially large projects, in a coherent manner. And that makes our review harder. That also makes it harder for us to hand these documents off to the boards, because it can be a little jumbled, it can be different orders. It's just not ideal. So that has a bunch of recommendations of how to organize things. Chapters 5, 6, and 7 address different steps of the development process. So chapter 5 has general guidance for each of the pre-submission steps. There's also specific guidance in Chapter 2. For example, if you're developing a principal building, Chapter 2 will have specific guidance on what you need to present at a neighborhood meeting, but Chapter 5B will have general guidance that is applicable to anyone who needs to do a neighborhood meeting. Chapter 6 talks about submitting a complete application. It also has the fee schedule in it and directions on how to submit those. And then Chapter 7 has post-submission, i.e. the public hearing, a reminder to read the staff memo before the public hearing, and then post-decision steps, including things like where is the registry of deeds. So that's the general layout. We're hoping that this is going to have a couple of benefits. Benefit 1, it can be broken down into component parts. If you're someone doing signage right now, you need to read all 15 pages of the submittal requirements. Our goal was, if you're doing signage under these new submittal requirements, you can kind of print out just the chapter that's relevant to you, which in this case is 2 pages long, and you need to read all of that. But the other things are just helpful and reference, and you can either choose to read them or not. If you read them, things might go smoother, but it's not the core requirements. Another benefit is explanations of what should be included in each required document. For example, people don't always know what to provide in narrative, and in Chapter 3, we have descriptions of what sorts of things you should provide in narrative. The last benefit is it has recommendations for each step of the process. Using this manual, you can get recommendations about best practices for neighborhood meetings generally, what you in particular need to present at a neighborhood meeting based on, is it the first neighborhood meeting, is it the second neighborhood meeting, what kind of development are you doing, and other requirements that you should be thinking about or working on at the same time. Currently, none of those things are being addressed in our submittal requirements, and it means that staff have to provide that advice on an ad hoc basis, which takes applicants' time, takes staff time, and really could be done more consistently and holistically. So that is why we are proposing these updated submittal requirements. What we need from you and from the planning board is, first, feedback on the draft. Tonight is just really an introduction, and we are looking for feedback by the next meeting. You can either email me your feedback prior to the next meeting, or we will put this on the agenda for the next meeting so that we can discuss any bigger questions you might have. Either of those options work. So the next meeting for the ZBA is June 1st, 2 weeks from tonight. Once we have your feedback and the planning board's feedback, and we've had a chance to incorporate anything that we can, we'll need a vote to adopt the new submittal requirements. Once both you and the planning board adopt the new submittal requirements, they'll go into effect for any project that doesn't currently have a complete application. So we'll work on, once that happens, we'll work on communicating with applicants and getting that transition period to go as smoothly as possible, but that's still a little bit off. So that is why we're doing this, what we're doing. And if you have any questions tonight, if you've had a chance to look over them, I'm happy to answer them, or in 2 weeks.
I think Catherine Garavaglia had her hand up again.
I know,
Go
I'm
ahead.
chatting today. So Charlotte, I think a lot of this sounds really great, and I like the thought process behind a lot of it. One thing that just kind of popped in my head though was, and I'm paraphrasing and I'm probably gonna get something wrong, but PDF requirements. I certainly understand the ease on your end. I question if that's not gonna be a gatekeeping problem. Like, I don't know people, like if we deal with a lot of developers, right? But occasionally we get your average homeowner. They may not have access to making PDFs to submit them. They may not understand how to do it. I'm imagining, like my parents trying to figure out how to scan, that's not happening. So if there could be a little flexibility on that and where it's a preference.
So
if we wanted to get a big law firm give you a PDF, that's totally fine.
There is definitely a balance to be had. On one hand, a Word document, I have a Word computer, or no, I have a Microsoft computer that can handle Word, but we've also received documents in pages format, like the Mac pages format, that if you send that to me, I simply cannot open it. So I think on a case-by-case basis, if someone expressed, I can't do PDFs, but I can do this other format, I think there definitely could be flexibility. But
So I see that in particular, but so I'm assuming, and shame on me, I've not been in one of the Somerville public libraries. There's been a pandemic. But like, I'm assuming they might have computers that have like Word on them or some type of thing that you could use. I really doubt they have Adobe. That's an expensive product. There are other variations that make PDFs like Nuance that a lot of firms use. That's where I have a hang up. If people have public access and availability to those types of things, fine. But if they don't, then making it a requirement seems really unfair.
we will double check that there is a public ability to make PDFs. If there's not, we will work to address that either on a case-by-case basis of Word document, et cetera, is fine, or writing it into the submittal requirements. Ultimately, submittal requirements are not set in stone. If someone wants to request a waiver from the board, that is always an option.
Okay.
If that were an extreme situation, I don't think we've run into problems with people being able to provide PDFs up until this point.
Hello. I have a question or a comment to piggyback on what Catherine's saying, is that all of us here, we can write our little notes and comments like that. That's what you want to hear. I'll put it in mind that I feel comfortable in that. I know the masses of applicants and cases and documents and all that stuff you guys are getting. So I get the gist of why you want to start streamlining some of these things. And, you know, lots of times you guys take the rap for something that wasn't done properly, and it never comes out that the applicant didn't do it properly. Or, you know, even, you know, we've got a lot of new blood here in the city, councilors and stuff like that, and they're going to get on board for their neighborhood meetings and stuff. The only thing I hope as we go forward with the planning department, OC, XYZ, is that we try to be user-friendly and try to accommodate all the constituents in, like Catherine said, not everybody's building a high rise, you know, and there are some things that I know it's hard to believe that I have trouble with scanning and stuff like that. You've got to have that equipment to be able to do that stuff, you know, and if you don't work for a company that lets you use something once in a while or make a copy or do it, you know, you're like up the creek. I'm going through that now with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for the state taxes and stuff like that for businesses. You know, I have to go and do some stuff for the COVID for this past couple of years and stuff. They only want it that way or the highway. Well, I mean, you know, well, don't you know anybody that has this? Can't you go to a library? Can't you do, like you said, you've got COVID, maybe we have access problems, mobility issues. I mean, you could think of a million reasons. I don't see why, at the end of the day, somebody can't suck it up and say, all right, Mrs. Jones, you know, we know you tried, we offered this, let me get back to you, and then hopefully they'll help them. You know, that's the point. You know, all this stuff, you know, we get all these new ways of doing things and, you know, certain protocols, and they're all well and good, and I understand the reason for it, and I like new, and I like learning, but we've always got to remember we're here for the people, and hopefully we'll always service them fairly.
One benefit of these new submittal requirements that I didn't mention, but I think of as a benefit, is when recommendations for neighborhood meetings, et cetera, things like that aren't written down and accessible anywhere, it takes a lot of staff time to provide that guidance. By having it written down, it frees up staff time for like more impactful things that we can be doing other than just explaining what a site plan is. Because a site plan, should, like, we're going to explain it pretty universally, but if we're explaining it dozens of times, that's lots of time that we're not spent doing other things. And if we can write it down once and then copy and paste or send them the document, that saves us time. That saves us time and lets us do other things that people also want us to do and that we also want to do.
And it's more consistent. There's less fallout from misinterpretation. You know, I get all that. You know, it's like I said, we've got a whole crew of new counselors on board. You know, they're going to be moving forward with everything opening up and having neighborhood meetings. And, you know, they're going to be having their people come to them, ask them questions. They're going to, something like this would be valuable to them. You know, so I think it's a good idea. But that was just my only comment. So we'll get on this. And yeah, I know Catherine, I know Ann and Ann, they're both that way. So thank you, Charlotte.
Of course. And any sorts of comments that you have, I would say this is going to be a work in progress. And there may be comments that you have that are great and valuable, but not easy changes. And so just like how with the zoning ordinance, there was a ethos of adopt and revise, where you can adopt it and then you can always update it and account for things that you didn't think about when you were adopting it originally. And I think we're taking that same approach with the submittal requirements of the only thing we need to update these is a simple vote from the ZBA and the planning board. We can update these on a monthly basis if we have capacity and if it is found to be necessary. So we want these to be good, but they don't need to be perfect before we're going to ask that the boards adopt them, because there are going to be a lot of things that we're just not going to realize they're problems until dozens and dozens of people start using them.
Right. Yeah.
And then we will address them then.
Well,
So
thank you. Oh, beautiful. Ann Brockelman has her hand up, Charlotte. Go ahead, Ann.
Charlotte, are these guidelines, or you don't appear on the board if you don't have all the documents? Because, Madam Chair, you've seen in the past where, you know, we just staff couldn't get the applicants to provide everything. And then in the end, they just said, fine, appear at the board. Let the board tell you you don't have everything required for us to make a decision.
So that is a very, very good and timely question. The goal of these is to be required. Well, so they're kind of two things. There are things that are requirements. So if you give me a moment, I can share my screens that I can like more clearly explain things that are requirements versus things that are guidance. Let's make sure. Can you see that Word document?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So for example, right now we're looking at Chapter 2A. This is the developing a principal buildings section. And under application submittal requirements, the documents listed here, if you meet the trigger, these are requirements. Like these are what we're expecting to see. In unusual circumstances, you might not need to provide it even if you meet the trigger, but this is what we're expecting. This is what we need to have a complete application. Then there are a lot of things like chapters 5, 6, and 7 are all guidance. So this is chapter 5A. It's guidance for a pre-submittal meeting, and it talks about things that you might want to talk about at the pre-submittal meeting. If you don't want to talk about these things at the pre-submittal meeting, you're not going to not get a pre-submittal meeting. It might just be slightly less valuable to you compared to if you follow the guidance, because these are things that we found. If you talk about these at the pre-submittal meeting, it lets staff give you heads up and better guidance about what you might need to think about moving forward. But they're not requirements, they're just guidance. So this manual does have both requirements that are necessary and guidance where we think it's a good idea for you to do this, but you're not going to not be able to get to the board if you don't do it.
Yeah, but I would behoove anybody. Why wouldn't you want to take the time to do it so that you don't come up to the zoning, get embarrassed? or you're up at planning and you don't have all your stuff you need. It was a total waste of your time and everybody else's.
That's why we have guidance, but if applicants choose not to
I get
listen, there's little we can do to force it.
Yeah.
So the second part of that, and then Ann Fullerton, yes. The second part of that is there are sometimes cases where some of these documents, for various reasons, we cannot get them. You've seen that happen in the past. If that is the case, it's dealt with on a case-by-case basis. The general approach of staff is we require these documents for a reason. We need these documents in order to be able to evaluate something about the project. And if you don't provide one of these documents, that's going to limit our ability to evaluate the project fully. It may limit it to the point that we simply can't evaluate the project, or it may be a relatively minor thing that can be addressed later on. For example, the current submittal requirements for a building require a lighting plan. We often waive that requirement informally because we expect that the lighting will change, sometimes dramatically, and there are clear, detailed standards in the ordinance that as long as you're complying with that, like the planning board usually doesn't have much to say about your lighting plan beyond we want you to comply. And so that can be checked at building permit with no detriment to the process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Ann Fullerton.
Who was it? Ian had a question for, yes, Ann Fullerton.
I think my suggestion might be most useful for the night. I suggest that we take a clip of Susan complaining about people not going through and talking about those items and link that in this electronic version of this document.
What are you saying?
I like that idea.
Don't chime in. I heard my name in there. Don't everybody be chiming in now. Jeepers creepers. What a bunch of wise guys.
I mean, I think.
So I say we all prepare our own document. Well, no, this is interesting.
Darling, can I ask you a question? I have two. And do we have like translators available if English is not their first language? How does that work here? I'm new. Help me.
So I would have to do a little more investigation, but my general understanding is we do have some staff in I always mix these up, Summer Viva. We have a lot of summer something offices and documents, and I sometimes switch them. I think it's the Summer Viva office. We do have full-time staff who are fluent in English and another language that is common in the community. There are lots and lots of demands on their time, and I don't know that they always have capacity to meet all of those demands. We have definitely talked internally about the accessibility of some of these documents to people who speak a language other than English. At this time, this document definitely has not been translated because it's a 63-page document and still in draft. If it was found to be a useful and good way to spend the limited staff time that we have to translate it, we definitely could. I think short of that, I think the translators or the staff who speak another language sometimes act as I'm gonna pronounce this wrong, ombudsman, helping walk constituents through various processes if there are staff that don't speak that language in that relevant department.
Thank you. And what is the difference between a land plat and a land title survey to you?
So this has been the subject of some internal discussion. So we're defining a land plat as being the lot lines that you want to have. Not the lot lines you currently have, but the lot lines that you want to have in the future. So a land plat would be used. There are two types. There's the land plat, which is for lot mergers, lot splits, and lot line adjustments. So you're only dealing with 2 lots or 3 lots, and you're not dealing with the thoroughfare. And then there is separately a subdivision plat, which is when you're doing a subdivision, which is defined by the ordinance as informally, basically creating multiple new lots and at least one thoroughfare, because if you didn't create that thoroughfare, one or more of the lots that you're creating would be landlocked. So those are kind of what you want to have the lot lines be. A land title survey, on the other hand, is what are the current lot lines and how do those lot lines relate to existing structures on the property, along with things like ownership information. This is a recent change. We currently call this a plot plan, but a plot plan is the informal term.
That's something.
Yeah, so if we look at the defined term, we acknowledge that a land title survey, land title survey is not the common name for this. So it's land title survey, sometimes informally referred to as a plot plan. This plan shows the location of existing buildings and structures. So that would be the difference.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, great. Yeah, so I will be at every ZV meeting. I'm doing the same presentation tomorrow night, but I will be at the ZV meeting next week, and we'll have this on the agenda again. So that if you have any questions that come up as you're reviewing it in more detail, either email me if they're simple, straightforward clarifications, or we can talk about them at the meeting. If you want to email me just to give me a heads up of things you want to talk about, that's also totally acceptable, but not necessary.
So what will be your experiment tonight? We first up. So we're the experiment you worked on us now.
You're a little quiet.
What do you mean?
There.
Your volume was just a little low.
Really?
Oh, I can hear you
That's
now.
Oh, you're good.
There you go. Now we're bigger. Thank you, Charlotte. We're gonna do our homework. Ian Fullerton, do you have any other comments you'd like to make tonight?
No.
Okay, so if you have any- what did she say?
You want to be the clerk. That's what I heard.
Yeah, I've spoken about this. We can speak to her again. We're gonna start pressuring you guys. And Ann Brockelman's pretending her volume's gone.
She just pretended to be frozen.
Yeah, did you see her? All right, ladies.
I just wanted to thank Catherine again as well.
Yeah, she's doing a great job. I don't know what we're gonna do.
You're actually really good.
I mean, do you
Hey,
have to
Ian
go to court
Fullerton.
yourself? Litigate?
I'm sorry?
Do you go to court yourself? Do you litigate, or you're just as
No.
an attorney? No.
No, I worked title insurance for First American for a long time. I'm now at a firm doing lender side finance work.
Okay.
Before that, as a baby attorney, I have done a few OUI trials and things like that. Moot court in high school. Like,
Oh, you're
Baby
great.
attorney. What are you saying, Ann Fullerton? You were lit up. What did you say?
Oh, I said that she actually does a really good job. She lends
Yeah.
confidence and competence to the role.
especially when I just say, yeah, Charlotte, fix it.
Hey, that's what Scott's here for.
Do you have a different mode of communicating tonight? You're all scratchy. Your computer one?
It's a different computer. My son is using my other one.
It was hard to hear you tonight. It was difficult.
Oh, interesting. Sorry about that.
I thought you want to know the feedback. You know, I could tell it wasn't your usual, you know. just so you'll know. All right, so if we're all done, do we have an adjournment going here?
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Seconded by Ann Brockelman. All in favor? Catherine Garavaglia,
Aye.
Ann Fullerton,
Aye.
Ann Brockelman,
Aye.
and Susan Fontano. Aye. Thank you, ladies. Have a great couple of weeks. Charlotte, thank you so much. And we're gonna keep your head spinning with all our comments. Good night, guys.
Aye.